Hi, my name is Abdul Sabor. Today I'm going to talk to you guys about something that used to be a huge thing back in the day around the 19th century. That boys and girls should or should not be taught in the same classrooms, or also known as gender segregation in classrooms. But as of recently, the idea of being segregated by gender in schools is becoming more popular as the years go by. Who knows what the schools will be like when we have our own children? But I'm here to tell you why children should not be segregated by gender in schools. And one day you might have to make that decision whether or not you want your children going to an all boy or all girl school or a mixed gender school, as well as myself. One argument for why children should not be segregated by gender in school is having a single sex education wouldn't work in some situations. For example, a teacher in an all boys school would only teach a certain way that would apply to all the boys in the classroom. But what about those sensitive boys that quite frankly might get intimidated by the teacher that gets in his face? Or maybe an all girls school that has some assertive girls that and some approaches by the teachers would could actually be ineffective, maybe even detrimental for these children's education. In a mixed gender school, these teachers are already used to doing all different types of things and all different types of approaches for each and every one of their students, which some teachers in same sex schools aren't trained to do. And the fact that there are gender stereotypes doesn't help these kids. It could even possibly lead to undermining gender equality. Another huge argument for why children should not be segregated by gender in schools is that they wouldn't be prepared for the real world. And as we all know, as we are getting older, we realize that the real world is extremely hard, and there are already numerous obstacles one has to overcome to be able to live in the real world. Would that help the stress of a child being taught in an all boy or girl school? Society doesn't split the workforce by gender, and neither does college. And sooner or later, they will have to start adjusting being with the other gender. Being raised and taught in a single sex school is unrealistic. Wouldn't it be better for your children to be able to work cooperatively and coexist with the members of the opposite sex? So, as we talked about the arguments for gender mixed education, we should also talk about the arguments against it. One of the huge arguments that are brought up to support single sex education is that both genders being in the same classroom together could be very distracting, especially at certain ages, which is true. However, does that necessarily mean that boys and girls should never be able to be in the same room together just so they can learn better or perform better? Again, this is not realistic. To some extent, I guess it could be beneficial, but would that help children in the long run? What if one day they have to work on a project with the opposite sex at work? Does that mean you're not going to learn anything or just going to fail? No. Instead, that should encourage putting mixed genders together so one day that if they need to work with the other gender, they have done so their entire life. It wouldn't be something new to them. It could also be a way to discipline children to be able to focus more when it gets tough and when you have distractions around you. And now that we have covered everything I wanted to talk to you about today, I just want to recap and go over very quickly what we spoke about. First, I started off talking about how ineffective certain teaching styles could be to many students and how it could lead to undermining gender equality. Second, I spoke about another argument supporting mixed gender schools by talking about how unrealistic it would be for the student and how it wouldn't train them to be ready for the real world. And finally, I spoke about the counter argument and how it could be used beneficially instead of thinking of it as something bad. Being together with the other gender could be challenging to the other student to focus more and learn how to cooperate with the other sex. And that's all for today. I hope you learned something that you will one day incorporate in the future to help you decide what's best for you and your children. Thank you all for listening to me today, and everyone, thank you for a great semester.